Hey friends, I'm Stacy and this is Gorgeously Aging. Thank you so much for sharing a piece of your day with me. Today, you guys, we are talking about thread lifts. And there is so much misconception and flat out lies out there in the industry. And I want to dispel some of those and also just have a very candid conversation about my experience with threads and why I have hundreds of them in my face, what their benefits are, and which kinds of threads you should be wary of. There's also a lot of bias in the industry, especially surgical bias. Obviously, surgeons want you to have surgery, but there is a time where surgery is needed and threads aren't the best option. So I want to talk about that today and just share my honest experience and who I think might really love threads and who I think may be disappointed by them. So we're going to jump right into it. And I just want to show you guys an image. This was my thumbnail, and it just shows some of the places on my face I've had threads around my eyes, on my cheeks, pretty much everywhere I have threads. So threads can be a really valuable tool in not only creating lift and support under the skin, but acting almost as a filler. So the areas where you can use threads to plump up the skin where you've had volume loss would be like the nasolabial folds, the marionette lines. You can use them under the eyes. You can really use them anywhere on the face. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, threads can be made up of several different materials. PDO are the most common, polydioxanone. There's PCL, polycaprolactone, and PLLA, polyl-lactic acid. I personally love PDO threads. They are very gentle in the skin. They are like the material of dissolvable sutures, and over time they dissolve. And as they dissolve, collagen is built up around those small threads, creating a natural collagen meshwork in the skin. Some of the threads that have gotten a bad name are basically those same types of threads, but very thick, and they almost go in like a surgery. You're numbed deep in the tissue. It's a big cannula that goes in. They pull, and you might have seen the images where they kind of pull up these threads that are sticking outside of the skin, and that lifts the face and gives you a thread lift. Now, even smaller threads give the face lift. It's just different. It's different mechanics. So the really robust, thick lifting threads do have some potential problems. Some people have liked them. They're not something that I would opt for, but some people really enjoy those types of lifting threads. I think when you get to that point where you're having a really deep cannula thread and you're having those those long strings of thread pulled out and they're pulling down tight and really pulling back, that's probably a good time to consider surgery. One of the things I wanted to show you here is something that I recently saw online. And this is an image of a woman who was, I think, 5 days post thread lift, who has a lot of dimpling. And this is one of those horror stories or the things that people worry about, looking unnatural. You also hear about these types of thread lifts and the threads breaking and then it looking uneven. One side's more lifted, the other side isn't, and it's just not a good look. And for that reason, I understand why people would be wary of this type of thread use. And this is where a lot of surgeons say, thread lifts are bad, they're terrible, I don't recommend them, even dermatologists, because they're talking about this kind of thread lift. Now, the smaller threads, which is an example of this, and this is the kind of threads that I do, they don't cause dimpling, but they do create support, collagen, and lift in the skin. Now, if you want a surgical thread lift like results, you're going to be disappointed in this type of procedure. But if you're looking to prevent aging, prevent sagging, create support in the skin, use threads in place of fillers, this is an incredible option. Now, I wouldn't have put more than 100 threads in my skin as a 54-year-old, almost 54, I'm 53 now, almost 54-year-old master and medical esthetician. I would not have put more than 100 threads in my skin if they weren't working. I never get guessed as my age, and whenever I'm out and about, people always think I'm much younger than I am. Now, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I think that the things that I'm doing are working, and I wouldn't continue doing something that isn't giving me results. So these are the kinds of threads that I'm talking about that I think are fantastic for aging skin. Definitely look into them. Talk to your provider about your options. If you want to learn more about advanced facial rejuvenation, you can find all of my free educational videos, demonstrations at rumble.com/gorgeouslyaging. If you forget that website, you can always just go to gorgeouslyaging.com and there's links to it from there as well. So these are the kind of threads. They come in various sizes, they come in various thicknesses, but the smaller, not huge threads, and I even like some of the cog threads, which do create a little more lift, but not the super deep, not the ones that cause dimpling, not the ones that can potentially in the future affect your ability to have a surgical facelift if you should decide to have one. So I think it's really important to remember that not all threads are the same. There's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of surgical bias because obviously surgeons want you to have surgery. So not all threads are the same, and the ones that they typically are talking about, and let's just go back to this image of Demi Moore. This, I can't say for sure, but my guess on the left in this photo, the indentations were created by threads. Now, again, I can't be 100% sure, but obviously that first picture is an older picture. Since then, Demi looks fantastic, has had some face work done. And that's the thing we want to avoid, is that dimpling, puckering, unnatural look. And that's why I stick to some of those shorter PDO threads. And they're just thinner. They meld into the skin so much more nicely. They don't create dimpling, and they don't create that issue of a thread breaking, because these are not threads that are pulled tight. They are threads that go into the skin, create a webbing, build natural collagen, create support in the skin. So I wanted to share those with you guys because I just think so many people are pushed away from threads, thinking that it's kind of just that option that could potentially create this crazy dimpling scenario. And that's not the only option out there. And I would definitely do your research. Don't trust what I have to say. Definitely get information from many different sources, but talk to people who maybe had really good results with some of those smaller threads, because they are such a valuable tool. So the ones that I like to use are I have used some cog threads, but I like screw threads, triple threads, multi-filament threads, mono threads, which are really easy. They're just a very small, thin thread. And again, they're inserted more shallow into the skin. They dissolve gradually over time. They can be used as a substitute to filler, and they create a beautiful meshwork supporting some of that underlying tissue like fat pads, and just keep things lifted as we age. Now, sometimes people get to a point where the laxity in their skin reaches a point where these thinner threads aren't going to be effective, especially if really the results that you want is a surgical facelift. So if the results you want is a surgical facelift, I would say avoid these thinner, smaller threads, or even the more robust lifting threads, and invest in a surgical facelift. And I think this is where a lot of surgeons really talk negatively about threads, is because people maybe have the wrong expectations. If you want surgical facelift results, then that really does require the surgical facelift. But if you're comfortable with a little bit of lift and a little bit of support, natural collagen, and using threads to fill those areas of the face that need a little extra fullness from volume loss, they are a super valuable tool. So thank you so much for sharing a piece of your day with me. If you guys have any questions about my thread experience, I am such a big fan of threads. There's something that I do annually, maybe every other year. I think there was a year where my son passed away where I skipped threads, but I typically try to do threads every year, once a year. And it's not that collagen, once you build collagen, it stays there for quite a long time. But the surface area on your face is rather large and neck. And because the threads are so small and tiny, by repeating it annually or every other year, you're just reinforcing that meshing or webbing of support. Some people can go as long as 3 or 4 years. I just am such a fan of them that I find an annual treatment to be ideal for me. So thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions about threads or my experience with threads, feel free to comment, and I will see you in my next video. Be good to yourselves and to others. I'll see you next time.